Okay, the second argument that the ethical egoist will give, and this is, again, something that we covered in the Philosopher's show, but I want to make sure that we cover it here just so that we get all the details nailed down, um, is that an ethical system must be practical. It's got to be something that we can actually use, and it seems like it's best to appeal to somebody's self-interest. That's how we motivate people, by giving them, by appealing to their self-interest. It's typically what a lot of our decisions are anyway. So here's what the way the argument sounds. Number one, moral judgments must be capable of motivating those who make them. Number two, assume that psychological egoism is true. That's something that, if you don't remember, go back. I did a philosopher show on that. Assume that psychological egoism is true. This is the idea that we only make choices that benefit ourselves. Not that we should, but just the fact that we only do. So we can only be motivated in the way that ethical egoism dictates. So this is the only practical way, right? If psychological egoism is true, then it seems like ethical egoism is the only thing that makes sense. Big objection to this. It seems like psychological egoism is false. It sure seems like we can make decisions that aren't selfish. I gave reasons for that in that philosopher show, but let's say sometimes people of this bent will give a further tweaking, and this is something good in philosophy when you find that I'm sorry, San Clementi's going on back there again, right? It's Sunday afternoon, by the way. I'm videotaping these on the weekend and putting them up later, so yeah, you're gonna hear sometimes some people walking around back there. But so it is good in philosophy when your system has shown to have a flaw, to tweak it. Sometimes you tweak it too much, and now it's just a totally new system, and it's nothing that you started off with, which is okay. I mean, like, what we're not trying to do, we're not trying to we're not trying to come up with some idea and we want that idea to win, right? And we want to, what we're doing is we're coming out with possibilities, and we're testing those, and possibly they need to be refined, and that's okay. Possibly they just need to be scrapped. So a possible refinement on this idea is predominant psychological egoism, which is that, okay, maybe we can make some selfless choices, but for the most part, they're all going to be selfish. Of course, the problem here is now you've just given us what we wanted. We're saying that it's possible to make altruistic decisions, so you just said that we could, right? I mean, sure, maybe most of them are not. Not as big of a W as you might think, though. I mean, imagine, list out all the different possible actions that you could take, and then let's just make one of them. And that's nearly infinite. Wow. I don't like saying nearly infinite. Really, all you mean is that's so big that I can't even imagine it. So that's unimaginably big number of choices that you can make. And let's just make one of those something that you could have chosen altruistically. Well, it seems like ethical egoism is going to get close enough. I mean, it's going to probably be the closest that we to any of the systems. So it doesn't seem like that's as big of a win as we might have liked. All right, a second objection. And again, I'm going to be checking my notes a lot because I want to make sure I cover everything, and we've got a lot to cover. Second objection is a normative theory. A normative theory is something to say this is the way things should be. A normative theory is intended to guide and criticize our choices rather than simply endorse what we do. What that means is, if we're going to adopt an ethical system, I don't want it just to say, okay, good, you want that? That's good. I'm going to call that good too. I'm going to call that good too. What I want is feedback. What I want is something to say, oh, you're about to do that? No, that's not the right thing to do, Whereas this theory, if it's just whatever I want, whatever benefits me, it seems like I'm just going to always get the green light. So, yeah, it seems like a poor system of ethics if it's just going to always agree with me. A third objection is that, and this is something that I gave in the Philosopher show, is that morality doesn't necessarily need to be practical at all. We don't always withdraw moral judgments when we learn that the agent could not have been motivated by them. So, for example, possibly Hitler was so obsessed with his plan that there's no way he could have been motivated to stop, right? Well, this argument would say, well, then he should be given an ethical system that is practical, something that he can actually do. So, something that says, well, good on you for doing what what benefited you. But that's not what we do, right? We don't say like, well, he couldn't have chosen otherwise, so I guess it's a good thing that he did it. No, we say that's still wrong, right? Even if he couldn't have chosen otherwise. Also, possibly our ethical systems might be aimed at our idealized versions of ourselves. Typically we tend to be incredibly irrational. I remember one time I this is a weird story, man. One time I went on, I took this girl to her prom. I was a freshman in college, and she didn't have a date, and it was her senior prom. Somebody, neighbor of my aunt, and they said, "Would you take her?" So I did. And afterwards, we were hanging out, and she told me, like, I met her brother. We were like playing cards or something, and she told me her brother did crystal meth, and I was like, "Oh man, wow!" And do you ever see like the pictures of people that are on meth? Like, within months they're losing teeth, and they've got bizarre scars, and they just look like they've aged decades. And this guy's like, yeah, but that's not going to happen to me. What? Okay, yeah, I guess so. No, that's crazy. Of course it's going to happen to you, right? There's no reason to think that it wouldn't happen to you. And yet we tend to be irrational in those kinds of ways. We tend to live life a lot of times like that. Our moral system shouldn't be aimed at us as we are, like irrational in those ways. Our moral system should say, no, you shouldn't do that. I don't care, that you don't think right enough correctly enough to get that you shouldn't do meth. You shouldn't do meth. You know what I'm saying? And finally, here's the last objection. Ethical egoism itself does seem to be impractical in itself, right? And remember, this is their argument, is that other theories are impractical. Ethical egoism could be seen as impractical. Here's how it goes. Number one, assume that I don't believe eating healthy is ultimately in my self-interest. Maybe I don't tend to put on weight, when I eat unhealthily. And if that's you, I hate you. On psychological egoism, right? This is the theory where you can only make choices that self-benefit. You cannot aim to do so. When you're thinking about it and you think this doesn't benefit me, this doesn't give me the benefit I want, a benefit to me, the good tastes give me the benefit, so I'm going for the good. You can't help but make that choice on psychological egoism. However, assume that eating healthy is actually in your self-interest, and it probably is, right? So on ethical egoism, it's the right thing for you to do then, right? Because it benefits you, and that's the right thing to do. So it's something that you can't do, but it's the right thing for you to do. Notice that is exactly the argument that was given before. The argument was, on these other systems, you can't make these choices, and yet we're telling you this is the right thing to do. No, that's not practical. Well, here's a situation where ethical egoism does the same.